And here we are previewing each team during the 2025 CFL season. We are on to team number 3. That is the Calgary Stampeders. And Ryan Ballantine of 3 Down Nation is on the show to talk Calgary football. Thanks for being here on this annual tradition, Ryan.
Well, it's always great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm just a little confused because you said we're talking about team number 3 when you mean that we're talking about the number 1 team in the CFL, the Calgary Stampeders.
If we're reversing the standings, yes.
No, I mean,
we're golf.
I get that we had to play we're number 1 on draft day this year, which is unusual for the Stampeders. But now that we're back, Vernon Adams Jr., we're ready. Oh, there's my wife with my homemade Slurpee from my Slurpee machine before it melts, which is nice. So anyway, speaking back to my Pollyanna attitude. Vernon Adams Jr. Here's the thing about the Stampeders. Have they been bad the last 2 seasons? Yes. In the Jake Maier era, they lost more than half of their games by a touchdown or less. The losses they had were by a touchdown or less. Do I think that Vernon Adams Jr. is a touchdown better per game than Jake Maier? Yes, I do. And if you take those losses and you make him that 1 touchdown a game better or 1 less pick 6 a game better than Jake Maier was, all of a sudden you've got a Stampeders team that's right in the mix every season.
Are you enjoying the mental gymnastics that Rider fans are doing after both Jake Maier and Tommy Stevens are now in Regina?
Jake is not there to start, so I think that that's fine. I think that there's no problem there for them. And anyone who doesn't think that Tommy Stevens is the best short yardage option in the CFL is crazy. That Calgary didn't re-sign him. I mean, obviously, it's interesting because they drafted a kid that they expect to come in and play short yardage with the 3rd overall pick or their 3rd round pick in the draft this year. They expect him to come in and be the short yardage guy. So now you don't need to use a quarterback spot on just a short yardage guy. I love Tommy Stevens. He's not a quarterback. He's a short yardage quarterback. If pushed into Tommy Stevens starting, the Saskatchewan Roughriders will be in deep trouble. That's what I think from that perspective. I think Tommy is a great guy. He's a good dude, and he does what he does incredibly well. But now you're using a quarterback spot on a guy that's just coming out there to rush. And as we're seeing in the CFL as a whole, more and more teams are going to a fullback or somebody else on the roster that specializes in that and can get you that yard without having to be a quarterback on the roster on game day.
And if I remember correctly, did Stevens have an 80-yard rush against the Riders last year?
Yes. 2?
The one was 69, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Sure one was 69. Nice. Yeah.
It's a nice rush. Tommy Stevens, I know he broke a couple 80-yard runs against Edmonton too. So yeah. I mean, again, he's got all the potential in the world, and can he complete a pass? Yes, he can complete a pass. Can he be your everyday starting quarterback? I'm not sure that he can. And that's a question that now Saskatchewan has to answer. And hopefully they don't have to. Hopefully it's never an issue, right? Hopefully you get 18 games of Trevor Harris and you hope that 9-9 is good enough to get into the playoffs and you go from there.
So 5-12-1 for the Stamps last year. They missed the playoffs for the first time since 2004. And obviously there was a lot of rumblings last year about Dave Dickenson pulling double duty, the general manager, the head coach. Should he be the one to go? And he wasn't. There were a couple other coaches, Mark Killam, Brent Monson, that are on their way out. And Mark Killam, universally loved, I think, in that Calgary locker room. Now, we have the luxury, or you have the challenge of talking about this before training camp gets underway. This is going to be released like day one of training camp. So happy Mother's Day to my mom and every mom out there. But do you see Dave changing his approach this year? I even saw lots of criticisms from Stampeders alumni alluding to who the problem was in the locker room at McMahon Stadium, but he's still there. So what is his approach going to look like in 2025?
I think at this time, if the Stampeders are not either hosting a West final or winning a West semifinal playoff game, I don't know that Dave Dickenson is here next year. After the season, when they announced that Dickenson would be staying, the team did say that they had a 6-point plan to how to get back to relevancy and how to get back to winning football, and that included Dave Dickenson staying. I honestly think for me, if I'm from the outside looking in, I think if he's not winning a playoff game, at least one playoff game, or hosting the West Final, right? If you win the division, I think you've earned yourself the ability to stay. Regardless of what happens in a playoff game there. But I think in that scenario, again, I wrote it last year. I stand by it now. I do think that no one should have that dual job anymore. It's just not feasible with the mindset of today's generation of football players that are coming up. I think it's too difficult to ask a guy to take less money and then change hats and ask him to do more. I just think it's too difficult, a mindset shift that no longer plays with today's kids. And it's weird to call them kids, but they are 22, 23 years old when they're coming into the league. And both Travis and I Beard are older than that. So I think in those scenarios, I think kids works without trying to be disrespectful. But I do think it's going to be difficult if they're not in a winning the division or that place. It's a problem. On the flip side, it is also much more difficult now to hate the Edmonton Elks because Mark Killam is legitimately one of the best people I have ever dealt with in the CFL. And I had fervently hoped in everything that I had that Dave Dickenson was going to become the general manager and Mark Killam was going to be the head coach here. Because I think that there are guys who will run through a wall for Mark Killam on any occasion. And he's surrounded himself with a number of those players in the offseason. So the Elks got better from a talent standpoint, but just bar none, they are absolutely better from a coaching standpoint in how he relates to the players. I can't say what he's going to do as a head coach on the field. I know he is undefeated, 1-0 as a head coach when he was the acting head coach for the Stampeders when Dave Dickenson had COVID a few years ago. Yeah. But Mark Killam, he makes the Elks hard to hate, just as Corey Mace does in Saskatchewan. I could feel the hate of 1,000 Suns for the Saskatchewan Roughriders for a long, long time. And same with the Edmonton Elks. And now you've got Corey Mace, who is legitimately one of the best people in the league at the helm of the Roughriders. And you've got Mark Killam in Edmonton. I mean, you've just completely neutered any ability to really hate these two teams because the guys that they have on the sideline are just so incredible. I'd go to bat for Corey Mace anytime, and I do the same for Mark Killam. And I think both franchises are better. It just, it makes me not green with envy, but like with sickness that I have to give up the hatred that I have for them. I'm queasy at the notion that I can't boo these teams anymore as vigorously because of the guys that are wearing the coach's heads.
Maybe with the aging beards, we're just getting soft.
soft like a beer, like the bottom of the beer. Like it's just nice and soft. Like it just.
I'm soft in other areas too, but my beard will highlight.
Soft around the middle, soft around the neck area. Getting soft in all kinds of areas. But yeah, it's tougher to hate them.
Yeah. So as we get ready to get going in training camp here, I just wanted to kind of talk about something that happened last year. So last year, the CFLPA, they released the report cards for the first time, and Calgary was, unfortunately at the bottom. So have you heard of anything, or do you think of anything that's happening to increase those grades in order to try to help, those players seem to enjoy their time a little bit better in Calgary?
Hot breakfast. Apparently the players are getting hot breakfast. So that's step one, was hot breakfast. Apparently that was a problem. It's really actually kind of interesting how the league has progressed, because when Calgary was on top in that like late teens, and they were winning every year, and they were a threat to go to the Grey Cup every year and all that, we had guys on the show who said the Stampeders take care of their players better than any other team in the league from these standpoints. And so to see that report card last year was kind of shocking. And it included things like the vets kick in to buy breakfast because the team wasn't allowed at the time because it was some sort of salary cap, whatever. And they said, the team kicks in for all the vets kicked in to have a continental breakfast available to players all the time. And they would grab that, like, practice roster guys said, I ate exclusively out of that breakfast. Like, I would pack stuff to take home with me so that I didn't have to pay for food, and it helped me be on the practice roster kind of deal. So to get that, the report card was kind of shocking. And I think it was kind of surprising. I asked Dave Dickenson about it at one point, and he said that he was also surprised to see the grades published. He said because the Stampeders, as he told it, got a different report card from the CFLPA before it was published. And he said those are not the grades that were shared with us originally, and so we were surprised to see that report as well. Now, that's the only comment the team has ever had on it, but they did say that they were going to action the items that were in the PA, including they're renovating to make the weight room facilities better, which is difficult in an aging stadium. But they're also, or as the Stampeders call it, the CFL's Fenway Park. There's different limitations to what they can do there as far as renovating and things like that. But they said they were improving the weight room, and that they were going to be adding hot meals, and that the Calgary Flames catering staff was going to be taking over meal prep for the team. So that is one big change that they're going to do as a result of the report. Hopefully the other things, the taking care of players' families and stuff like that, that's without trying to throw anybody under that should be the easy stuff. Have somebody whose job it is to ensure that families are being taken care of, ensure that travel arrangements are being taken care of. That should be somebody's job. And if it's somebody's additional duty, that makes it much more difficult.
I remain a champion of McMahon Stadium for all its faults. I think you have the best food value in the CFL in Calgary. Nowhere else can you get a pulled pork parfait. Nowhere else can you get a Spudinator or a reasonably priced foot-long hot dog with whatever the heck you want. Like, Calgary, they bring it. And the pocket dog. I don't know. I'm a fan of McMahon.
The pocket dog's
I know. That's a Calgary classic.
I will also point out that Calgary is on the lower end for beer prices as well. And on top of that, as season ticket holders, are the only team in the league that I was able to, because I kind of dived into season ticket holder benefits in this offseason with an intention about writing a comparison between all the teams. Now, not all the teams got back to me, but some did. Of the teams that got back to me, only Calgary offers a discount for season ticket holders on liquor. The season ticket holder discount of 25% off concessions during happy hour applies to booze, and nowhere else
That's
in the
pretty
league
sweet.
it does. So everybody else in the league is like, booze is accepted from that. It doesn't matter in Calgary. All of your drinks, your alcoholic drinks, are included in your season ticket holder concession discount, which makes them even more affordable. So yeah, I agree with you. The Stampeders concessions are phenomenal, although I am typically treated to the medium meal before games, so I don't have to venture up into the concourse. But when my family does need to eat there, there's all kinds of great options. And there's not a bad seat in that building.
No.
There's not somewhere where you're sitting where you don't have a good view of the football game. Even the front rows are kind of high up enough and close enough to the sideline that you can interact with players if you're in that section while still being able to see the whole field. There's a lot of good things about McMahon. There are a lot of bad things about McMahon, but there are a lot of really good things about McMahon. The problem is at this point, and again, anecdotally, going back a few years, the Stampeders did a number of renovations to McMahon Stadium, poured in a couple $1 million of the ownership's money, and the response from the University of Calgary, which owns McMahon Stadium, and the McMahon Stadium Society that runs it, was to raise the rent for the Stampeders. And they said, well, it's a nicer building now. And so that relationship, I think at that point, soured a little bit from Flames ownership between them and McMahon Stadium organization. I don't know that that's still the same now, but I do know at one time there was kind of an organizational mandate that no additional dollars will go into renovating the stadium from the Flames' point of view, because why would they pay a bunch of money and then have to pay extra money because it's a nicer building? So I think we're in a situation where the Flames not, or the Stampeders not owning the building means that it's going to be a more difficult thing. That said, once the hockey rink opens here in Calgary, you have the leverage to then go and ask for a football stadium. You didn't have it right now because the stadium is still being built here. And right now it's just a big hole in the ground. But once the Flames' new arena is done, I would expect to see a renewed push for a new football stadium.
Calgary Edmonton, obviously it's a rivalry that runs very deep. We saw these renovation plans for Commonwealth Stadium that look pretty significant. I feel like once those get done, Calgary's going to want to respond with some football changes of their own.
Calgary's going to have to vote NDP first. That's the problem. Calgary's going to have to vote NDP first because any provincial money in this province has historically gone to Edmonton rather than Calgary, because the government of the day is typically a conservative government and the NDP typically win in Edmonton. So when governments are trying to buy votes, they're not trying to buy the votes of the people who already vote for them. They're trying to buy the votes of the people who don't. And so that's why you typically see large infrastructure projects in Edmonton rather than Calgary, because they know Calgary's voting conservative no matter what.
I can't wait to see the YouTube comments as Two and Out goes political. I might as well just post this on TikTok and watch.
It's just an accurate statement. It's not a condemnation of what's happened or the current government or anything else. It's not. It's historically, large infrastructure projects have been better funded in Edmonton than they have in Calgary, and that historically Edmonton has voted NDP and Calgary's voted conservative with a conservative government. I mean, you can draw whatever conclusions you want, but if you didn't draw that one, you're wrong.
Okay, but I will ask you, like, McMahon Stadium now, there has been, and I don't know how connected there are, but non-contact injuries in Calgary. Malik Henry had one last year. He is going to return to the receiving corps this year, and he's still young, so that's going to be a good return for the Stampeders. New turf at the stadium this year. That looks like that will probably be a welcome addition by the team.
It should. I mean, the turf was 10 years old, I think, was the last time they replaced it, and they said it has a 10-year life. So, it lasted exactly how long as it should. They didn't extend that life by any stretch. They didn't leave it in for 15 years when it should only have been there for 10. When they installed it, they said it's a 10-year turf. and after 10 years, they replaced it. So at that point, might it have been better to be replaced earlier? Probably. Did the 10-year turf take into account Calgary winters? Maybe not. But at the same time, what we never had was bubbles of water rolling under the field like they had in Edmonton. So, like,
and the Grey Cup playing surface in Edmonton.
Yes, and the Winter Classic, as it was called. When
I'm just giving you ammunition.
Ice rink instead of the football team.
So, obviously, the biggest addition in the offseason is quarterback Vernon Adams Jr. Now, he did say, hey, I'm the best recruiter in the CFL. I don't know if that 100% played out, but if they can protect him, I see Vernon Adams Jr. throw into a big receiver like Reggie Bagleton. And then a receiver named Dominic Rhymes, who had a lot of success with Vernon Adams Jr. in BC. They are reuniting in red and white in Calgary. It seems like there's a lot of pressure on Vernon Adams Jr., but I think he proved in BC that he can certainly handle it. And he has so many great leadership qualities. I think he's a guy that makes Calgary hard to hate because a lot of people love Vernon Adams Jr. and they want to see him succeed. But, man, he's got some great targets to throw to in Calgary and to make things happen.
Dominic Rhymes, 6'4". You've got Tevin Jones, 6'3". You've got Damian Alford, their number 1 overall draft pick, at 6'6". There is a lot of height in the Stampeders receiving core now in a way that maybe hadn't been before. I don't know that they necessarily had that kind of size in the receiving core before. You said a tall receiver like Reggie Bagleton. I think part of what makes Reggie Bagleton tall is his ability to get up because he's only 6'1".
Wow.
He's not that freak high athlete. He's just the ability to get up and high point the football is better than most.
He plays bigger than 6'1".
Yeah, you could have a receiving core of all guys that are 6'2" or bigger, with the exception of Bagleton, and I guess Clark Barnes is a little shorter there, but he's your underneath possession guy anyway. So I think Alford, man, if he pans out in the way that the Stampeders are hoping. He's 6'6", 230 something with, a 4.46 40 time. Like, this guy's got big time speed and huge, like, his massive wingspan. Like, this guy could be real dangerous. And he's replacing a guy like Cole Tucker, who was 5'10".
Yeah.
So you're replacing a guy, Cole Tucker, who's shorter. Mark and Michelle was a burner on the outside, but he was, a little guy. Vernon did very well with big receivers, so they just went out and got a ton of big receivers. That's, he likes to throw the ball up and have his receivers come down with it. Well, then let's just get a bunch of guys that are taller than your average DB in the CFL is not 6 feet.
Yeah.
Those guys are 5'10", 5'11", and so now you're asking them to break up a pass against a guy that's 6'6". Good luck. If he can get down the field and get up and get the ball, he's coming down with it.
Yeah, so let's switch over to the defense now. So I don't think it was a secret that the pass rush struggled last year. So we have a new defensive coordinator this year, and then just a bunch of other defensive changes. So what do you think is going to be the difference maker with some of the players who have joined the team? And are they going to be able to, make up for the players like, Mike Rose, Micah Alway, like the people that you guys did lose?
Respectfully to Cam Judge and Micah Alway, they went from a linebacking duo that was making tackles for 4 yards into a linebacking duo that was making tackles at 7 yards. And that's a pretty big difference. Now, is that because you lost Derek Wigan, who was no longer plugging up the middle and forcing guys into a hole, and so, guys were getting a little more clear before they could make the tackle? Maybe. But this team was statistically the worst against the run by a couple yards, not like a couple yards per carry, and that's not good.
No.
When you're at 2 yards per carry worse against the run than everybody else in the league, that's really, really bad. Now on the opposite side, Mike Rose leaving is terrible. I hate the idea that Mike Rose isn't here anymore. Again, a great guy, a good dude, always happy to interact with us, and you know, I text with him pretty often through his entire career here about the team and everything. But I just don't know, you know, if he was also not as effective as he could have been. I would have loved to see him next to Folarin Oromalade and going crazy. I mean, the Stampeders spent their money on Flo, and they decided to make that change to bring him back. And as a result, that's what ended up with Mike Rose going. I think that they were maybe targeting some other players in free agency with that money that they didn't get because those guys ended up in Edmonton or elsewhere. So I think that might have been a little bit of a difficulty for them. But I mean, I think from a defensive back standpoint, that's the one that stands out to me. They cut almost everybody. There's almost like the defensive backfield is wide open for guys to make a name for themselves and to come in and play well. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the defensive backfield. But it was clear after last season, you know, I didn't like that they fired Brent Monson because I didn't know that it was his scheme that all of a sudden was bad. It was just an execution thing, and I think the guys were in the right place to make tackles. They just weren't making tackles last year. But with Flo coming off the edge, I mean, again, if you're getting more sacks, that makes a difference. You know, that extra half a sack a game average could turn into wins. You know, like it is such a minor difference. You know, they say it's 5 plays or 10 plays or whatever that make the difference in a football game from a win and a loss. You know, that extra quarter second is the difference between hitting a guy, sacking a player, and hitting him after he threw the ball. You know, and if you just turn a couple of those quarter of a seconds into sacks, then maybe the Stampeders aren't missing the playoffs last year. You know, I think the margin was so razor thin between winning and losing for that team last year, and they just couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't gain the confidence that they were a winning football team because they just it was one big mistake a game that caused them to lose every single week. Trying to eliminate that, you know, and I think those big gash runs were part of it.
I think that was so strange from a Dave Dickenson team. They just undisciplined, you know, mistakes that you wouldn't expect from a team coached
penalties
by him.
There were a couple of players that I won't name specifically that coaches told me were pretty consistently in the wrong spot in the defensive backfield. You know, they said they said back-to-back weeks they gave up 50-yard passes because the one DB wasn't where he was supposed to be. He ran somewhere else. And they're like, how, you know, that cost us 50 yards. And that's points on the board, and that's a loss now. You know, you turn a win into a loss with and it's hard to say one play is the difference between a win or a loss, but when you lose by 1 and you threw a pick 6, that's it. You know, that punt is probably not a touchdown. Right? So those moments are a problem. And hopefully they've been able to correct them.
Man, the Stampeders have a punter that's 6'4", 225 pounds?
Yeah. I mean, Australian punters exist.
Yeah.
I know. So Cody Grace is gone, but I'm looking at the roster and I see Mark Vassett. He's listed there now as a global player, but man.
You let all-star punters go when there's other Australian punters in the pipeline. You've got the number 1 pick in the global draft. Great, we have a new punter. You know, like you're either taking a decent, like you can get a little bit of money, but you're not going to get a lot of money when there's 1,000 Australians who can also kick the ball.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, and again, love Cody Grace. Cody Grace, good dude. He was on our show. And he was great, and one of the best at just pounding the ball down the field. And at one point, broke his finger in a game recovering his own punt, and then like came to the sideline with his pinky finger sticking out of the side of his hand like that, and just grabbed it and went and continued to play. Like, no questions about that dude's toughness or anything else. Great guy. He was able to put a backspin on the ball so that he could try and chase it down and punt, which was something that was, a unique aspect to the Canadian game, with punters being able to recover the punt and keep possession. So I think, that ability is great. But they drafted 2 Australian punters behind him who they hope can do the same thing. And one of them was an all-conference punter in U.S. college last year. So, I mean, they knew they were getting a punter on draft day, and so I don't think they cared that Cody Grace went to Edmonton. So, because anything over a rookie salary for an Australian punter at this point seems like poorly invested dollars.
So just looping back on the draft and Canadian talent overall with the Stampeders. They took Damien Alford. We already mentioned him, but the Stamps had the most draft picks. So they're definitely looking at stocking the cupboards when it came to Canadian talent. We haven't even mentioned Jalen Philpott here. There has to be high hopes for him in 2025, and a lot of the issues were health over the last few years. When he's on the field, he's able to contribute, but they just need him on the field.
Yeah, Jalen Philpott is an absolute game breaker if given the opportunity. And interestingly, again, when you look at what Jake was doing, Jake was throwing those screen passes, the hitch passes, the 6-7 yards down the field. He really wasn't doing much getting the ball down the field where a Philpott can kill you. We saw it last year with Tyson Philpott, and I know them being twins. If one twin can do it, the other one can. That's not always the case. But when Philpott got into space, he was dangerous and he's fast. So now you've got a receiving core that has Dominique Rhymes. You have a receiving core that has Clark Barnes, who for my money would have been the Rookie of the Year for the Stampeders if he wasn't injured. I think he still ended up getting it, but the team nod, but he wasn't a division nominee. I think if he plays all season last year, he has a shot at being Rookie of the Year. I think you have you've got Reggie Bagleton. You've got a returning Malik Henry. You've got Jalen Philpott. There's no shortage of targets and that's not even talking about Alford, who comes in, like I said, at 6'6", 230 and 4.46 speed. Like that you've just added a very dangerous weapon to a room that was already pretty dangerous. And again, health has been the issue. They lose Malik Henry at the beginning of last season. They lose Jalen Philpott for a while. He's not a consistent answer because he's coming off of a season-ending injury the year before, and he never really gets quite to 100%. So all of these guys can be dangerous, and in the draft, they targeted him number 1 overall. Dwayne Cameron said in his press conference that night that I think that if Paris Shand hadn't signed in the NFL, Paris Shand would have been the number 1 overall pick here. But he did sign in the NFL, and they said as soon as Paris had an NFL contract, we knew we were going Alford, and they did. And there was never a question for them. It wasn't an argument. They think he's the most talented player in this draft and the best player to make an impact. And he signed yesterday, which means he's in camp. So he's not a futures. He's not somebody that they're hoping falls out, and he had a couple NFL opportunities, but they did get him signed, and he was on the field yesterday and today. So hopefully he's able to really kind of get in there and make a difference for them.
I just want to ask you about running backs, specifically Dedrick Mills. I had really high hopes for him last year. It appeared maybe there were some personal things going on, so he wasn't around the team as often as they would have liked him to have been. I think he's 1,000-yard rusher. Does it look like hopefully that's behind him and he gets to carry the rock for the Stamps for most of 2025?
Yeah, he dealt with some off-field tragedy last year that I'm not he hasn't gone public with it. I don't think it's been out there in the public eye, but he dealt with some off-field tragedy last year that was really difficult for him mentally, which did leave him to leaving the team for 3 or 4 weeks to try and get his head right. Running backs can be as great as they want, and be the greatest running back that's ever put on pads. But if you're not getting blocking from your offensive line, you're not going to do anything either. So the hope this year is kind of Mills being back to 100%, and being back to who he can be, is what the Stampeders will get. And it really, having that lack of a real run game last year also killed Calgary, because if you can't run the ball and you're only throwing the ball 8 yards down the field, you don't scare anybody. And so now the hope is that Dedrick Mills can get back to what he's capable of. And if he does that, then the Stampeders will be able to stretch the field and get down the field to those big targets.
My last guy I want to ask you about is PJ Walker. I know he's backing up Vernon Adams Jr., but I know some fans really wanted to see him get on the field late last year, but football is a game of preparation, and it might have been just throwing him to the wolves right then. Do you see his role with the team in Crow? I know Logan Bonner is still there. Is his role with the team going to be increasing? He is 30 years old. He's not 22 or anything like that. But
yeah, he'll be the backup. He'll be the backup, and if pressed into action, you hope that he's able to do it. I think most of the reason the fans wanted to see him in action last year was because then it would make his contract no longer, like, it would have officialized his contract, and he would have been under contract heading into the season. And that was before they acquired Vernon Adams. Yeah. So you really looked at that as, it's a desire to get him under contract. Because I think he was on the practice roster or something like at the end of last season, and so he automatically became a free agent. And now if he's a free agent, he's already convinced to sign in Canada. Does he choose to stay in Calgary, or was Calgary, the team that made his entry into the league possible, and now he can go anywhere? So there was feeling that if he was on the roster, then he couldn't sign elsewhere. But then they go out and get Vernon Adams Jr., and that becomes kind of a moot point. So I think PJ, it'll be interesting to see what he does in the preseason. And you want him to be a solid backup, just like with Saskatchewan. You hope that your starter doesn't get hurt, and that he's not pressed into action. But maybe they have packages for him that work out. Until he hasn't thrown a ball yet, so it's hard to think that he's anything beyond just a prospect, even though he's 30 years old with NFL experience. Until he actually starts throwing the ball, there's nothing we can know about him.
So, week 1, it's still weird to say, but June 7th, Bo Levi Mitchell and the Hamilton Tiger Cats will be at McMahon Stadium for the season opener. Wow, that's less than a month away now. Ryan Ballantine with 3 Down Nation. Thanks for coming on the show to talk Stampeders, my man.
Can't wait to see it. Can't wait for everything. And as you mentioned, this is dropping on Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to my mom and your moms and all moms that are out there in the Two and Out podcast land. Appreciate you having me. Can't wait to see what this season brings. I think a season of the most uncertainty that I've seen in a Stampeder season in the last couple decades. So we shall see what it brings, and whether or not the Stampeders can return to glory, or if this is just another step in what needs to be a complete rebuild.
That is Team 3 of 9 as we continue to travel through the league and preview every team for the 2025 CFL season. We've got 6 more to go. If you missed the Toronto and the Winnipeg previews, rate, review, subscribe to Two and Out on your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube to check those out. I'm Travis Currah, and for Sheldon Jones and Ryan Ballantine, happy Mother's Day, and thanks for checking out Two and Out.